This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. BREWtally Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREW and get 10% off your total order. Now on to the show. Thanks for doing this first and foremost, and on kind of somewhat short notice.
Thanks for having me.
You've been kind of making the rounds, actually surprisingly very recently, and that's kind of something I guess we'll hop right into is, I think for the most part, I've always kind of known you to kind of be the quiet one in the band, outside of the press you and Dan would do for guitar magazines and so forth. You didn't really seem to do a whole lot of press. Was that just kind of given your more propensity for being kind of shy, or just no one really was asking?
I'm more than happy to do any kind of press or, podcasts like this, stuff like that. But like a lot of the dudes in my band have got something to say. And, and if they want to take the mic, so to speak, then that's perfectly fine with me. But then again, like you said, if somebody asks me to do a podcast or asks me to do an interview or anything like that, yeah, I'm more than happy to, for sure. But yeah, it's kind of the consensus is that I'm the mysterious one.
So as such, the handful of podcasts, I wasn't able to get through, or two, I should say, the Rock and Roll Beer Guy podcast you did that posted yesterday, I believe. But obviously heard you on Kyle from Bad Wolves podcast. And it's one of the few times I feel like I got to know more of you, but in the limited stuff I've been able to find of you in the last, really, I would say since Long Live, I've not really ever heard you talk about your childhood, really. We were just kind of talking you've lived out in California for a while, but I don't think I really know much about your childhood, how you really got into playing guitar and any of your, beginning bands or anything. So I kind of want to know a little bit about that, your history kind of.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in Orange County, California. Typical suburban upbringing. My parents are still together, which, for my generation is, I don't want to say it's weird, but
no, it is. When I tell people, my wife and I, when we started cutting off, when my wife and I first met and we were yeah, both of our parents are still together, they're weird. And I was
right.
I know it doesn't seem like it to us because that's just what we know, but it is weird to grow up and have people be your parents are still together. What's that like? Yeah.
And I remember growing up, it was, like you said, it was very much a normal thing for my friends to be, I'm going to be at my dad's house this weekend, or I'm going to my mom's over Christmas or whatever. That was very, very much just a normal thing. But yeah, I mean, my parents are still together, still hanging out in Orange County. But yeah, I mean, I had your typical suburban upbringing. I grew up playing in the street, skateboarding. I went to went to public school. Discovered music at a somewhat early age, like 11 or 12. Not necessarily actively playing music, but I developed an interest in it. And then all throughout, middle school, or what it was known as then junior high, through high school and up into my 20s, yeah, like music definitely played an important role in my life. And then gradually, like I picked up a guitar around 11 or 12, and just kind of stuck with it. And then eventually found myself playing in bands, and then met up with the Atreyu guys, and I've been doing it ever since.
So a couple of things to that. A, do you still have your first guitar?
I have my first real guitar. It was a Gibson Les Paul Studio. I got it when I was, I think, 18 or 19. That was like I said, it was my first real genuine bona fide guitar. Actually, our first record, Suicide Notes and Butterfly Kisses, was all done on that guitar. But yeah, I still have it. It's still, I plug it in every few years, and things still sounds great. I'll probably never get rid of it.
It's always funny because the story with that either is I sold it, I got rid of it, lost it, traded it for something. So it's always one of those that if you still have your first one, it's always kind of special and all that kind of stuff. I still have mine. I actually just found it recently and it's a piece of shit, but I can't stand to get rid of it. I'm just but it was my first. Right.
Yeah. When it comes to gear, I'm a little bit of a hoarder. I hate to get rid of it because I always convinced myself that someday I'm going to need it, even though it's been sitting in the garage for the past 8 or 9 years and I haven't seen it, or it's just collecting dust, but I just cannot get rid of it, much to my wife's chagrin. My garage is just filled with guitar cases and amplifiers that are just collecting dust, which will probably continue to sit there and just collect dust.
Hey, you never know. One day, in 20, 30 years, one of those things might be worth just a shitload of money.
Probably not, but I mean, there's always
you gotta tell your wife.
Right. Yeah.
No, this is going to be vintage. And
it's an investment.
Yeah. That's what sometimes I have to tell myself with stuff. And I'm like, it's an investment. And then it's an investment in what? Me?
Right.
Something I can sell later on.
Yeah, it's an investment in my OCD tendencies to not get rid of shit.
What was, because what's interesting is I think for a lot of people, I think you're a few years older than me. I'm going to be 37 in a few months. So I think you're probably 40, 42, somewhere in there.
I'll be 42 next month.
Okay. So not terribly much older than me, but I was going to say what's interesting is for, I think, people my age, like you and Dan and a handful of people that came up in your scene, as your local scene that became a national scene, became kind of people to inspire some of us to want to play guitar. But what were some of your earlier influences? Because some of the shirts and some of your playing styles, I don't think necessarily would lend themselves to be metallic players. I feel like you're more of a player's player with feel and.
Actually, wait, you know what? You're dropping out. Okay, so what was the question?
What I'm at least picking apart, seeing your playing style and being able to differentiate you from Dan. I don't feel like your playing necessarily started with, being a Metallica kind of guy or something like that. I feel like you were maybe more of a player who kind of filled in space and kind of was a very, I don't know the word I'm looking for right now, but I feel like your influences maybe not be as obvious as some others. So who were some of your influences when playing guitar and starting out?
Well, actually, I mean, the band that really sent me on my way was Metallica.
Oh.
I mean, they weren't necessarily the reason I picked up a guitar, but they were one of the many reasons I picked up a guitar. I had discovered Metallica and then picked up the guitar, but my skill level at the time was not near the point it needed to be for me to learn a Metallica song. So that didn't come till like a little later. But as far as like guitar influences, I'm just trying to think of like growing up. It was when I first developed the chops to be able to play stuff like that. Yeah, it was stuff like Metallica. Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains has always been one of my favorite guitar players ever. In fact, I got to meet him very, very briefly a number of years ago at the NAMM show. And it was the most awkward, uncomfortable thing. all like 100% on my part, because like, long story short, I was at the NAMM show a number of years ago. I got separated from the group I was with. So I was just kind of meandering around by myself, and I ran into a friend who worked for Line 6 at the time. And we were just kind of hanging out, like passing a flask back and forth. Those were the drinking days, obviously. And Jerry Cantrell walks by, and, I'm like, oh shit, that's Jerry Cantrell. That's like, that's my favorite guitar player. And my friend goes, oh, I know Jerry, let's go meet him. And she like grabs me by the arm and we start making a beeline for him. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no, wait, I'm not ready for this. And before I know it, she's like, Travis, Jerry, Travis. And then she leaves.
Oh no.
So it's just like me and him. And it was like that old SNL skit where Chris Farley interviews Paul McCartney. It was exactly like that. And like I was just grasping at straws to think of something to say, and I was just fumbling all over my words. And I remember walking away from the conversation. Like, I don't even remember what the hell we talked about, but I just remember walking away from the conversation just going, stupid, that was so stupid, Travis, you totally screwed that up. That's your, so that was kind of a funny anecdote, I guess. But yeah, guitar players, everybody from, like I said, Jerry Cantrell, Andreas Kisser from Sepultura. I've always admired his playing. Stevie Ray Vaughan, even though obviously I don't play like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but he's one of those guitar players that, when he hits one or two notes, exactly who it is. Same thing with, Dimebag Darrell. Yeah, man, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but yeah, as far as being a guitar player, I definitely try to be as well-rounded as I possibly can, whether it's on the technique side of things or the theory side. Like, I'm constantly trying to be well-versed in music theory. For the longest time, I had the approach of, well, if there's rules, they're made to be broken, which will get you so far, but it's not 100% detrimental that you have to learn music theory, but it definitely helps. It provides, tools that you can later use that you might not have thought about had you not known this aspect of theory. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of funny you say that, because I think something that becomes interesting, and it's not even just learning how to play music or anything like that, I think it applies to a lot of life, is there's the initial passion or the spark of passion, but then you realize you need to take it a little bit more seriously if you want to become proficient at a thing. Or I don't want to say a master, because I don't think you can technically ever really master anything. You can always learn and keep learning. But I think that's kind of the interesting thing, in thinking about the band, you guys, I mean, essentially this is really like the only band you guys have done. Like, you guys were all either still in or just out of high school, from what I've basically heard. And it's interesting to think about that from the perspective of you started this thing as just something to do, to jam with friends and have fun. And then now here we are 20 years later and it's a career.
Right. Yeah. I was, even at a young age, I was very much a realist. You know, like I would have never have put money on being in a full-time band, making a living out of it, let alone for the better part of 20 years. You know, I thought, we'd get signed, record a record, maybe do a little touring, and then we'd probably all go back to work or go back to school and, live the normal 9 to 5. But it didn't pan out that way. It was a very slow and steady rise for us. The momentum just never really stopped. So yeah, I mean, it's I have to kind of pinch myself every once in a while and, be like, dude, I still get to do this. This is awesome.
Does it surprise you to think back and see how much at the time, your local scene really impacted this growing kind of different stamp of metal? Is it kind of weird to see, like, you Avenged and a lot of the people out in your area just put a stamp on metal and kind of having a national attention to it?
Yeah, it was definitely weird. I wouldn't even say weird. It was just it definitely felt like we were part of something that was garnering attention. Obviously bands like us, Avenged, Thrice, and then, obviously like 18 Visions, Throwdown, Bleeding Through. It was kind of odd to have all this attention focused on our little, I guess I wouldn't say little scene, but, I mean, we were all just dumb kids making a racket, and evidently a lot of people liked it.
Something else in doing this, and like I said, me being from the East Coast initially, and I kind of have thought about this as I've gotten older in relationship to even more rap and hip hop, there being very regional sounds, between the East Coast, the West Coast, and then in the late 90s, early 2000s, the stuff coming out of the South and so forth. And, kind of putting that prism or that lens on the hardcore scene kind of as it was growing. You have a definitive sound in the East Coast, but then kind of around the same time you're coming up is sort of when that like New England style Massachusetts scene was also kind of coming up and so forth. What are some of your memories of making your trek to the East Coast and kind of seeing this other new wave of music kind of coming up in the same, overall umbrella of metal?
We were definitely cognizant of what was going on in different parts of the country. Especially like you said, like the Massachusetts, like Killswitch, Unearth, Shadows Fall, like that, those group of bands, we definitely were aware of what was going on over there. Even, through the South, like bands like Norma Jean or even like Stretch Armstrong, or even down into Florida, you had like Poison the Well and Shai Hulud. So it was cool to know that this kind of stuff was going on all over the country, and there were kindred spirits. It wasn't just us and our little scene in our own little bubble. There was a lot of stuff going on all over the country, and it was definitely cool to have been part of that.
It's just always kind of interesting because I think in today's landscape now, we have the internet, and you have things like Hate 5-6, which are they're getting old cassettes from old shows back in the late 90s, early 2000s and so forth. And, you see pages like Return to the Pit, and you see this sense of nostalgia that everyone has for these bands like yourself and so forth. But the weird thing is everyone's like, oh, I was there. And you're like, you all will attest. Yeah, there were 3 people at that show. Like, it seems cool to say that you were there now, but when we were doing this thing, like, no one was supporting it. And it's kind of interesting to think back to that, because it's like, you just look at it with such fondness and nostalgia now that everyone's like, well, there's no way there wasn't people falling off, like climbing the rafters and jumping off of everything, because that's what it would seem like it would be now. That's what I would do now. And I just don't know if, like, you look at that, because I know you're not super active on social media necessarily, but I don't know if you see that and just kind of chuckle at yourself and you're like, where were all of you like 20 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely had, especially like on those first couple tours, we had those shows where there was literally like 10 people there, and 5 of them were there just because they would have been there anyway. Like, that was their normal, like, watering hole, and we just happened to be there. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying now that, like you said, there's this nostalgia factor that has kind of taken place, and people kind of pining for, I don't know if they're just trying to cling on to their youth, or or they just straight up miss those days. But I think that happens with every, I don't want to say scene, but it's very, very, very cyclical, like the whole, like 10, 15 years ago, the 80s was a huge thing. And now it kind of seems like the 90s are very much a thing right now. Even like the clothes people are wearing, like skin tight jeans aren't cool anymore. And swoopy haircuts are, it's definitely not the fashion right now. It's like more like, looser fitting clothes and like oversized beanies and flannels. Like, that's cool now. So it's all very, very, very cyclical. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of is what it is. That's just kind of how things pan out.
As you're kind of saying, talking about cyclical things, and as sort of what I was just saying, I kind of just thought of something. I know obviously people have an attachment to, suicide notes. That's what a lot of people still love. I'm sure you see the comments of people going, I wish they go back to the sound of the first 2 records, so on and so forth. Is it weird to know that you're kind of part of that for people, that you are a part of their youth that they're trying to recapture?
I definitely, I kind of remind myself of that. Like, I shouldn't say remind myself, but I get reminded of that. Like, people from time to time come up to me and be, oh, your first few records, like, that was a soundtrack to my youth. Or, that was like, a huge part of, it made me who I am today. And that's a lot to take in, because I'm just a dude who got lucky, who I can kind of make my way around a guitar. And, like, it's weird to be put up on a pedestal like that. I mean, it's nice. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's cool to have admiration. It makes me feel good, but I'm definitely not a guy who's like, I definitely don't expect it, like somebody to come up and be like, and just shower me with all this praise, because like I said, I'm just a dude doing what he does.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But it's kind of a weird thing, though, where I don't think we as people think about how tied to things we become. And like, I very much am in that same boat. Like, there are aspects of some of your records where I can put myself back to where I was when they came out, how I identified with certain things from those records, and a lot of other records. That's the beautiful thing about music. But it's something where I don't think I've really ever said that to someone, because I realize how much of a mindfuck that probably is. Like, to say,
Right.
like, you're so ensconced in my life that you're why I am the way I am. And it's like, what do you then in turn do with that? Just like, I've made the comment to a handful of people on this show where, their lyrics may be dealing with some really heavy shit. Think about like the first Korn record and songs like Daddy and stuff like that. And from that point on, Jonathan Davis now becomes the focal point of people's abuse stories and so forth. And then, him having to hear some of the worst shit that have happened to people day in and day out, letters, fan mail, so on and so forth. And it's like, you already have heard what he's gone through and him getting that out. And now you're basically bouncing it back and sending it to him, but it's coming back millionfold, basically. And I don't think a lot of people tend to think about what that does to the person you're telling.
Yeah, it can be really, really heavy. And it's not something that you just dump on somebody every day. You know what I mean? But then again, like I said, like the fact that somebody even latched on to our music for whatever reason, whether it be a certain lyric resonated with them, or they really liked that sick breakdown. The fact that it's resonating with people at all is it's a mind fuck, but in a cool way, really. Like I said, like me personally, I never thought that anybody would even hear any kind of music that I've made or any kind of music that I've been a part of, let alone have it resonate with them to the point where, they do come up to me and say, what you did struck a chord with me and it made me feel a certain way. And, it's a lot of time I have to like take a second and kind of process that and wrap my head around the fact that some complete stranger really likes something that I did. It's at the end of the day, it's cool. Like I'm not complaining one bit.
I think the thing that's sort of interesting in thinking about your band is kind of, the fact that you went away. And I'm trying to remember if I posed this to either Brand Porter or even Dan in my talks with them over the last couple of years since you guys have come back. But, I'd asked this to Dennis and refused. And, you're in a unique position where you went away for a little while. So you got to be, actually, I guess that's one of the first questions. So when the band went away and you no longer are Travis from Atreyu, was there a little bit of a rediscovery of who you are as a person or what you meant to yourself?
I don't know if there was a full-on like rediscovery of myself, but I definitely it put things into perspective, how I relate to being in Atreyu. It's that old saying, like, you don't know what you've got until it's left you or until it's gone. At the time, right before we went on that hiatus, we were all pretty much fried. It was just a constant cycle of write a record, record the record, tour the record, wash, rinse, repeat. So I think we had to kind of just step away from it and kind of reevaluate what we like, who we are as people, what we want out of this band. And it took the better part of 4 years of inactivity for us to to realize okay, what we had done with this band up until that point is actually pretty fucking awesome. We all miss it, so let's reconvene and start the machine up again.
The other part of that is, and it sounds like obviously it is the case, but was there something to where you have a better understanding of what the band means to you now versus what it meant to you when you started? Were you able to kind of reflect on that at all?
Yeah. There were for me personally, there were just a lot of things that I took for granted.
Mm.
Like the fact that I get to travel the world and play music to people. Like when you think of that as like that's what I do for a living. It's fucking absurd. It's like it's like it's too good to be true, But during those last, like that last year before we went on hiatus, like I said, we were all just fried. We were kind of phoning it in, and there were times like we'd be on tour and we'd be counting down the days till we got home, and and just focusing on how much time we would have off as opposed to how much time we would be spending on the road or getting shit done as a band. It's weird now that I'm older now, and usually the overall, I guess, like the arc of being a guy in a band, or at least a moderately successful band, is that when they're younger they want to hit the road nonstop and play as much as they can and be as busy as they possibly can, and then they start to kind of wind down, maybe tour a week or two here, a week or two there. But for me, it's kind of the opposite. Like now that I know, and I'm very cognizant of the fact of how very lucky and fortunate we are to even be able to still be doing this. Like I want to stay busy as much as we can, whether it's touring or writing or doing whatever, because I know that, this could very well end at any point. And I want to take full advantage of every opportunity that we can. And, basically I just don't want to get a 9-to-5 job.
It's something I've brought up on the show previously. And as we're kind of talking about, the career and so forth of the band, with you guys being signed so young and doing the band as a career so young, I often think about my own life and how, as I was coming up, just like everybody, you think you fucking know everything when you're, 16, 17, 18, no one can tell you anything. And then you hit your 20s and you're kind of starting to think about, the next 5 years or so and where you want your life to go, to then being, where I am now, like in my mid 30s, looking at 40, and have been, out of school for 20 some odd years and have life experiences. And you look back and you're like, God, I didn't know fucking anything. But the flip side of that is I try to sometimes think about being in your position where you are traveling unsupervised, basically hitting the road before cell phones, before all this kind of stuff, and really kind of having to prove who you are to yourself while you're still learning who you are as a person or who you want to be. But you're also signed to a label that has expectations of what they want out of you, has, you have to learn about budgets, you have to learn about marketing, you have to learn about all the things that you didn't give a fuck about when you started a band, but have to start learning about in order to be successful, unless you want to get taken advantage of. And I often think about, did I cut out there on the end of that or no?
Yeah, I missed pretty much everything you said.
Okay, I'm actually going to go grab my laptop and let it charge real fast, just in case this shit keeps happening, so I have a backup. All right, so hold on just a second.
Yeah, no worries.
Basically, the question is just, well, what was the last part you heard, I guess?
It literally cut out right as you started talking.
Oh, okay. All right. So basically just kind of talking more about, as you're touring and you're kind of touring at a very young age and, you're kind of figuring out who you are as a person and kind of who you want to be, but then also being signed and part of the, I would say not downfall or detriment, but just kind of the byproduct of being young and getting signed is now all the aspects of being in a band that you didn't give a fuck about when you started, having to learn about marketing, budgets and all of these kind of things, that it starts kind of making you think of things from a different perspective. Now you're not doing this just for the sheer love of it, but you're doing it because you're expected to make this person or this label a certain amount of money. You're expected to, when you make music now, it's not just music that you feel passionate about, but now it's also a product. It's a commodity. And wondering what it looks like for you when you are learning about who you're going to be and who you want to be, and kind of thinking about that as you get older now, where you're like, fuck, I can't believe, like, I didn't realize this had such an impact on who I became. And maybe it wouldn't have if I wouldn't have been in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, being in Atreyu, has definitely shaped who I am today, in a lot of ways. And yeah, it was very much, when you're, like you said, when you're in a band starting out, most likely in your mid to late teens, you're not thinking about budgets. You're not thinking about booking agents. You're just thinking about writing the sickest riffs you can. But when you do get signed and when your band starts to gain momentum, you're gonna learn these things whether you realize it or not. And I think it's just a matter of what kind of bandwidth you have for that kind of, I guess if you want to call it like the behind the scenes stuff. Some people are very, very proactive with it. Some people are very, very hands-on with it. And there's definitely should be somebody in the band, at least one person who plays that role. And luckily, you're frozen now.
I mean, it's Michigan right now. Getting everywhere as a whole, bringing it back to where we started. So maybe I don't know. I would assume cold weather shouldn't impact internet, but I have no idea. I don't know if that's a thing.
I mean, who knows? Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, I guess there's rolling, like you were saying, rolling blackouts. So I guess in theory, like weather can affect stuff like that.
I mean, we'll just chalk it up to that. I mean, we got to blame it on something, right? May as well just blame it on the weather.
Well, I can't wait for someone to be like, oh, it was great until the whatever, like get a better internet connection. It's like, I'm sorry, we're on the internet. This shit fucking happens.
Right. Yeah. Nothing's perfect.
No. Unfortunately, I wish it were more perfect.
Right.
But no, and it's just kind of weird because like I constantly think about you guys all growing up and what being in the industry, how it shaped you, maybe good or bad because of the experiences you have. Like I think in some instances, if you listen to the Pure Pleasure podcast, Dewey constantly talks about how, he thinks a lot of people when they grow up, when they're young, they should travel, the US and kind of see what they're made of and so forth. And I think it definitely in my years now in the last 5 or 6 with my wife starting to travel and see more of the US and hopefully internationally when we can, I think it is becoming this thing where I'm starting to get a broader sense of the world. Like I've gone to places when people talk about, when Southern hospitality, it's a thing a lot of people talk about. I love Atlanta and I've gone to a handful of places in the South and that shit's real. It is a real thing. And I've seen how, being from the East Coast, I see how we are out there. And I think I get a broader sense of how people are. And I think you can't help but understand that and see that when you are in a position like yours. But I also wonder if, for all the good that, touring at a young age can do for you, I also just wonder if it becomes a thing where, being a part of the business side of it just kind of starts fucking with you mentally, where you're like, well, I thought these songs were good. And now someone who loved what I was doing is like, no, that sucks. You're not good. And if it just becomes this thing where you're like, oh, fuck, well, shit, this is all I really know how to do. And now you're telling me it's not good. And
yeah,
what that does to you.
That's pretty much the main reason why I refuse to ever look at any kind of comment section. Because, I'm very much, I don't want to say I'm a pessimist, but I tend to be a bit cynical at times. So with with that being said, I'll read all the positive comments, and they essentially just kind of go through one ear and out the other. And then I'll read one negative comment and I'll be like, who the fuck was this? Like, fuck you. You have no idea what it took to get here, blah, 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 blah. So just for my own sanity, I can't look at comment sections for that very reason, because it'll just start fucking with my brain and it'll put me in a pissy mood, and it's just not worth it.
Was it at least better when you started because the internet really didn't exist to the capacity it did? So the only bad reviews were those that were in press, or did that actually make it worse because you're like, oh, fuck, this one person who actually has a platform is being shitty?
I mean, yeah, I think I had, in a weird way, I think I had a tougher skin back then. So yeah, now I'm just like, I know what it will do to me if I start reading negative comments, so I just avoid it altogether.
Something else I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. On this show, obviously it's called BREWtally Speaking, and it is a clever pun on drinking and so forth. And really, it was just a fun way to come up with a pun that would be easily Googleable for us to pop up. For SEO and stuff like that. But really it's a play on having, at times brutally honest conversations, which is something in doing this podcast that I think people have said, I kind of have a knack for, is just having people divulge things to me who barely know me at all. And, some people have not wanted to come onto the show because of the name or the perception of what they think the show is without really giving it a fair shake or listening to it. And very recently, I was talking to my dad, and he was talking about, oh, you have people who listen to the show, and do you ever think about what you will do with your platform? And I never really thought of it like that, because I'm like, no one I mean, I see people listen to it, but no one comments on it for the most part. So I don't really ever think about this as having some kind of a platform that people are going to hear. So I used to kind of be like, oh, it's a fucking, like, we used to joke, Scott Stapp won't do our show because he's sober now. And I still think it's funny because part of me is like, well, then I hope you don't ever play a bar or a club ever again, because, oh my God, they have alcohol there.
Right.
So it's sort of like, that's where I kind of took the joke of it all, is like, you won't do my show because you're sober now and you're afraid it's gonna conflict with your sobriety. Like, then how strong in your sobriety are you if, like, you can't do a show that won't even ask you, like, not like be like, oh, we're getting hammered with Scott Stapp, like, it ain't happening. But it does become this thing where recently I've kind of come to the conclusion that maybe we need to utilize our and decide that that's a route that they need to take. So I know, you made a comment back to Nam where you back in your drinking days before meeting Jerry Cantrell, but with, I know you've kind of done some other podcasts and so forth, talking about your sobriety and so forth, but, I guess for just kind of a quick recap, what led you to it and how have you found it to be? How have you found it to be a positive influence, not just in your daily life, but maybe even your working relationships with the rest of the dudes in the band?
Yeah, I mean, I stopped drinking a little over 6 years ago, and it was a long time coming. I had been a drinker for the better part of like 20 years, and it started off fun and innocent, just like everybody else, but then it became part of my life. Like, it became an everyday thing for me. Mm-hmm. And there's a billion different reasons as to why. And I'm still trying to sift through all of that. But it just got to a point where, people actually took notice that I wasn't doing well. Because whenever I would drink, I was never a liability. You meet some people, or you've got friends who are like, oh, I can't drink Jack, otherwise I'll get into a fight with somebody, or I can't drink this because I'll end up naked in a field somewhere. Like, that kind of stuff never happened with me. So it was kind of it was a blessing, but it was also a curse because it gave me license to just drink even more because I never really got out of hand. I'm sure I got annoying from time to time, but that was probably it. Like one of the biggest reasons why I drank so much was just because I've never felt comfortable in my own skin. So the drinking definitely helped alleviate that. And like another reason is I can't stand being around drunk people when I'm dead sober. So I figured, well, if I can't beat them, I may as well join them. And so, that carried on for years. And then, a bunch of mental and emotional things as well. But yeah, I mean, it got to a point where, the dudes in my band were like, we're concerned for you. Like, we can see it on you. You don't look good. You're, you kind of look like a sad clown. It's, you're smiling on the outside, but we can tell from a mile away that smile is definitely not on the inside. So yeah, I had to take a bit of a sabbatical for about 9 or 10 months and just kind of figure my shit out. And it wasn't easy, obviously. I mean, if it were easy, nobody would have an alcohol problem. I'm still dealing with, I've come to terms with the fact that I'm going to be dealing with this for the rest of my life. Some days are better than others, and I'm not going to lie. I miss getting fucked up. Like some of the funnest times I've ever had in my life were when I was hammered. But everything has a shelf life, and I mean, even just looking back to it now, like at the rate I was drinking, if I were to continue on, I would have severe health problems by now, if not dead. So, and even just the hangovers themselves, like, it's fun. When you're in your 20s, after a night of boozing, you can wake up, take an Advil, down some water, and shake it off, and you're fine for the rest of the day. But when you get up there in age, shaking those hangovers is not as easy. Like, you're out of commission for 24 to 48 hours. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad I stopped when I did. And there's a lot of positive aspects, obviously, from abstaining from drinking, especially at the rate I was. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy. It took a lot of getting used to. And I now, like, being in social situations for me is fucking terrifying. I'm super socially awkward, even though people tell me that I'm not. I constantly feel like I am. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands when I'm talking to somebody, and I just can't relax. I can't get comfortable. So now I force myself and I throw myself into social situations where I know I'm going to feel uncomfortable, just so I can kind of condition myself to getting used to that, because that's just an everyday part of life. There's no escaping that, and I'm going to have to deal with it sooner or later. So I may as well just throw myself into it. And if I fail, I fail. If not, then whatever. It's I'm actually kind of surprised as to how well I've done, because once I find something I like, I tend to just I dive headfirst into it. The only bad thing is that ever since I quit drinking, I've developed a massive sweet tooth, because obviously your body metabolizes alcohol into sugar. So all of a sudden you stop and your brain's like, whoa, where's the sugar? So whenever I'm grocery shopping, I have to put like blinders on every time I'm walking through the bakery section. Otherwise I'll just load my cart with like cupcakes and cookies.
So you're like that kind of a sweets person.
Yeah,
See, it's like Sour Patch Kid. Like, I don't give a fuck about chocolate. Donuts, sometimes, not really big on cakes and things like confectioners and stuff like that. But like Sour Patch Kids, Swedish Fish, that's my kryptonite.
Oh, for sure. Because they're
the worst of the worst.
Yeah, they're bite sized, so you can just pop them left and right.
Fuckers. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't even, like, you can go through a whole bag and not even realize it.
Yeah. Something kind of, as you were saying about how you tend to be more of a recluse, like, and maybe if you're kind of not comfortable with me saying this on when we put this out, I can cut it out. But I have noticed, due to getting to hang out with Porter when you guys are around and getting to see you guys, like, it's interesting on the I forget what the tour was actually called, but the run you did with Memphis Mayfire and Ice Nine Kills, when you guys played in Fort Wayne. It was interesting to go with Porter that night because there's a bar at Pierre's, like, when that was, like, still, like, around, and we went to the bar after you guys' show, and I think within like a week or two after that, Porter was like, I think I'm done drinking. Because from what I saw with Patrick, and it's nothing against Patrick or anything like that, I think it's just a situation, like, you have a bartender and, his job is to provide kind of the fun for everybody and just kind of, keep everyone going. And, there's some big personalities on that tour. And it was really interesting to kind of see the touring aspect. It's one of the few where and I think that dressing room actually kind of creates everyone to hang out, because it's just basically a big, circle. And
Right,
then,
yeah.
like, a couple of green rooms, as it were. So it was really cool because it was one of the first tours I've really seen where all of you are hanging out. Sans you, I didn't really see you. And most of the tours I've seen where I'm hanging out with Porter, you're not really there until probably 10, 15 minutes before, when I think you're kind of doing the band thing to get ready. And I think the one time I've seen you not do that, and it was funny, you said, like, you force yourself into situations and you kind of get nervous with your hands and such, was at the Disrupt tour when I went to Chicago. You were talking to someone while I was waiting for Porter, and you seemed very awkward because you kept looking around like you were waiting for someone to spot you, or like you were like, oh, I found you. But you seemed to be talking to a friend. So it was one of those where I was like, oh, Travis is actually out before the set. Like,
Rare sighting.
Yeah. And I was going to say something, but then I just kind of was like, no, like, you're talking to your friend. I'm waiting for Porter and Julia. Like, it's whatever. But it is something where I've wondered if it's been hard for you because you're more of an introvert, or more because potentially it's still just kind of hard for you to, try this or whatever. I don't know. And so it's kind of been something I've peripherally noticed and have wondered, and have never obviously asked you, because unlike right now where I barely know you, it's one of those where I'm like, I'm not going to, like, see Travis for 10 minutes and be like, so why do you just kind of duck out, like, not ever around?
I mean, it's never like a conscious decision to where I'm going to be like, oh, I got to stay away from everybody. I got to be alone. Like, it's just kind of, a lot of the times it just depends on my mood. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who wants to have a conversation with me. I just don't assume that everybody wants to have a conversation with me. In fact, more often than not, I assume people don't want to talk to me. Therefore, I'm not going to put forth the effort, which is kind of shitty.
No, it makes sense though.
So, I mean, I guess a lot of it just, I can chalk it up to just having like low self-esteem to, like I said, like, I assume nobody wants to talk to me, so why bother? But then again, there's times where I'm like, I'm feeling a little ornery and I want to go hang out and meet people and have a conversation with a complete stranger. And there's times where I don't even want to talk to, people that I've known for years. Or, it's just it depends on when you catch me, like what type of mood I'm in, I guess. And not to say that I'm like a super moody person. Like, I'm very, you can ask anybody, I'm very much just a kind of go with the flow guy. I'm very low maintenance, it takes a lot to get me, like, riled up, other than Southern California traffic. Like, that shit will drive me crazy. But other than that,
Do you have bad road rage? You seem like someone who would.
I do it and I don't. Like, I'll catch myself. Like somebody, like one of my worst pet peeves is when somebody doesn't use their turn signal.
Oh, same.
So if somebody like veers in front of me without using their turn signal, it just enrages me. And then I have to like remind myself, dude, it's not a big deal. Chill the fuck out. Like, you're not, it's not the end of the world. Move on.
I think it's a common courtesy thing, though. Like, it's like you.
True.
And like, because I get the same way when, I'll hold a door open for someone or whatever. And then like, maybe they're supposed to hold the next one for me, or they see I'm coming and they don't hold the door. And I'm like, oh, we'll just go fuck myself, I guess. Like, thanks.
Yeah. It's very easy to take shit personally, and I just have to constantly remind myself, dude, there's bigger things to worry about than the fact that this person just cut you off.
It's funny because I was talking to Lee from Born of Osiris. We just posted the episode, but we're talking like a week or so ago. And, we were talking about therapy and stuff like that. Something I've been going through the last like month and a half ish. And so we kind of connected on that. And, something we were saying is like, we think we're the epicenter of the world, but we're not. And I like made the comment and countered, and I was like, but we are, though. Be like, we have, in order to kind of survive, we have to kind of think we are. And it's this weird duality of thinking about, I'm the center of the universe and I need to make sure that I'm taken care of. And, everything needs to happen to me or needs to, have these results so that I can keep going. But that also doesn't serve you well if that's all you ever think about is, I'm the epicenter, fuck everybody else.
Yeah, it's very easy to forget that we as human beings are an extremely small and minuscule aspect of the universe as a whole. You know what I mean? I think it just kind of depends on perspective. Like you said, like to ourselves, we are the center of the universe. We are the center of our own world. Yeah, for sure. But everybody thinks like that to some extent, so, again, I have to remind myself, like, the universe is a very big place and I am an extremely small part of it. So it's smart to be concerned or be stressed out about certain things that take place in your life. But at the end of the day, what does it all really add up to in relation to the rest of the world? So, it just all depends on perspective, I think.
Yeah, that's been a key phrase for me lately, is perspective. Like I even said, I think to Porter in a text recently, I was like, sometimes at therapy, like you feel like you're just blabbing on and you're like, fuck, like, is this person, like, they're not stopping me, which is what most people would do in this situation where they're like, shut the fuck up for like 2 seconds so I can say something. It sort of comes back to a thing where I made the comment, I go, at times it's almost like looking in 2D for your whole life, and then someone gives you the keys to see in 3D, and you're just like, does anyone else know about this?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Holy shit. Like, what a difference in perspective this has caused. And, it just permeates into so many other facets and relationships in your life. I do have I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and this is something I know you've addressed quite a bit. But the question I have is, I think, a different perspective than what I've seen anyone ask or bring up with it. So at least throw the caveat out there in case you're like, dude, I fucking have answered this question a shitload. So obviously you were in trap for a very, very, very short amount of time, in the grand scheme of things. The thing that I find interesting about your correlation to it is the fact that whenever news has been made, they always use that promo photo with you in it.
Right.
And, I would assume most everyone knows you're not in that band and have not been in that band for a long time. But something I always think is interesting is sometimes the the crossfire people find themselves in who aren't even remotely related to something. You know, a while back I had the drummer from Phil Anselmo's band on, and I was like, you know, you're in 3 different bands with Phil. So when all this shit was going on, were you like, dude, my fucking career is tanked now, and I had nothing to do with this. So adversely, as you see all this shit and you're in the background of every fucking news post that everyone's posting, and you haven't been in that band for years, was there any worry or concern that by proximity you were concerned that people were going to be like, oh, well, fuck Travis too? Or did you catch any of that by chance? Or were most people kind of aware that like that was an illusion again?
Okay, there you go.
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd rather that they didn't use the photo with me. But you know, that's out of my hands. So, you know, what can I do? But for the most part, people know that like I don't have any ties to that band. I was never even really officially in the band. I just acted as the touring guitarist for like better part of for like a year and a half. And I have seen posts or comments where people have mentioned basically to the effect of like, I bet Travis is stoked he's not part of that shit show anymore. I'm pretty confident that people know that I don't have the same political stance as Chris Taylor Brown from that band. So, but yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm so far removed from it right now, and I'm pretty sure most people realize that.
Yeah, it's just one of those that, like I said, I'm interested in, and I've kind of thought more, I guess, almost like the butterfly effect, where it's like something that seems so small can have such a giant fucking impact on somebody else, and we just don't think about those things, you know, and kind of changing subjects, but very much the same. I think something that's kind of really made me think about that, and the shift in perspectives, again, kind of bringing that back up, is playing Last of Us 2. You know, I was pleasantly surprised with that game. You know, I think it did a really good job, and something I don't know that everyone takes away from it. I can't remember if on the STFU podcast, if you said you had beaten it or if you said you had given up on it.
No, I played it all the way through.
Okay. All right. So spoiler alert, I guess, for anyone who is not finished with that game, which I took forever to finish it. So I feel like if I finished it, then everyone else probably has. But I felt like when I finished Last of Us 2, it really set the tone for me thinking about how, again, we are the center of our universe, and you think that you're the hero in your story, but you could be the villain in somebody else's. And all it takes is the lack of knowledge on and perspective of what led them to make the decisions they did and to act the way that they did. And you're like, oh, well, you're doing something to me and you're bad. But then it's like, you know, you look at the small things you did in Last of Us 2, where you're like, or Last of Us 1, where you're like not even thinking about it. You're like, oh, this is a fucking game. This is what I have to do. And then you see in Last of Us 2 that those things have huge impacts for what's happening in the game. And when I got done with it, I was just like, wow, it's really kind of profound to kind of think about that and have that kind of be something that happens because you're playing a video game. And so, like I was saying, it was one of those where as I kept seeing the, you know, these photos and so forth, that it's like, I wonder if you have been more or less guilty by association for something you weren't even involved in.
Yeah. I mean, I got off pretty scot-free. Thank God.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. And I'm very thankful and fortunate for that. But, you know, but also too, like, I don't regret having spent time or, you know, filling in on guitar for that band at all. I mean, I got paid to play guitar. Like, this might be a really stupid question. Is that a weird job to take, you know, like where you're in a band? Okay, I was gonna say, I don't know if my question makes sense, where I'm like, you're in your band, you write the music and you're playing it, and now basically you're a hired gun. And I've never really talked to necessarily many hired guns, or if I have, that's pretty much their job. They're just a hired gun.
So it would seem like one of those things, especially since you never wrote anything with the band, that it would be like, is it weird to just come in and be like, all right, punching in for my set, I learned my parts, and that's all I need to do?
Yeah, there was definitely a bit of a learning curve for me, because prior to that, the only band I had really ever toured with was Atreyu. And when you go from one camp to another, it's, the dynamics are completely different. The overall situation is different. I was the only guitar player for about 90% of the set. So that was something I had to get used to, because I was so used to looking over to my right and seeing Dan over there.
Right.
So, and just the songs themselves, like I kind of went into it a little bit too, probably a little bit too confident, because I wasn't very familiar with Trap's catalog other than like their big songs or their big singles that they had that they had at the time. So I had to learn all these songs, and I figured, well, it's just basic, radio rock. How hard can it be? There's actually a lot of weird nuances and stuff that I had to like adjust to and get used to. And I'm actually, I'm thankful for that, because it made me a better guitar player and a better musician. And it also, in turn, made me a better touring musician. By what I mean by that is, it forced me to adapt to new personalities, new situations, a new fan base, because like their fans had no idea who I was. I was just some new guy on the guitar. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a learning experience for sure. And I, like I said, I don't regret it. But then again, that being said, this was before the whole,
right,
I guess if you want to call it a meltdown or whatever it was.
I don't know.
Had that happened, had I been asked to join after said meltdown, I probably would have steered clear from it. But things panned out the way they did, and I came out unscathed. So yeah, I'm stoked.
Yeah, it's funny. I had made a comment when my wife and I were in Vegas when you guys played Lost Rages 2 years ago now, I think. Right literally below my hotel, Trapped, Tantric, and Saliva.
Yeah, I actually met up with Trap's bass player, Pete, who is a dear friend of mine, and I still keep in contact with him, as well as the drummer Dylan Howard, who was playing drums while I was in Trapped as well. I keep pretty semi-regular contact with those guys, and yeah, I was lucky enough to hang out with Pete for at least a few minutes and catch up.
It's funny. I think I texted Porter and I was like, "Oh shit, is Travis going to do a double set tonight?"
No,
no, you didn't. I know
that didn't. One set is enough for me.
Kind of speaking of video games, I know when you were on Kyle's show, and again, for anyone who hasn't checked out, that's a really fun, lengthy conversation. And like I said, one of the impetus is that a word? Whatever, sounds cool.
It is now.
Yeah. Of when I was like, oh fuck, I guess if Travis is down to like kind of do like a long, like one of these and kind of talk long form, definitely need to get him on. I'm all about collecting. So like at this point, you and Alex were the last two that I needed to get, and now it's you and Kyle. So getting them down the line here. But that was kind of one of the things where, it was really interesting to kind of hear some of your hobbies and interests, and video games. You just kind of assume if you're in a band that like you have video games on the bus, and it's an easy time killer, especially now with Switches and stuff like that as well, right, to be more portable. Given the fact that you probably have a lot of time on your hands, what have you been playing lately?
Well, I just finished the newest Assassin's Creed, Valhalla. Yeah. I enjoyed that. It was very lengthy. So like I finished the game and I was like stoked, because I'm like, okay, finally, I'm done with that. And I started Watch Dogs Legion not too long ago.
I'm not a fan of it so far.
I played the two before it,
Yeah.
and I thought they were cool, and I started up on this newest one, and it took a second to kind of kind of find my bearings, so to speak. So now I'm like sitting down and I'm enjoying playing the game. Whereas when I first started it, I was like, what the fuck is going on with this game? I do not understand what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I am, and that's what's dissuaded me from going back and playing it, because I was really excited for it, and then I started playing it, and I was like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah. See, I experienced that a lot too when I first started a game. It's the whole like learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's like that with anything really. Like once you kind of, like I said, like you get your bearings or your sea legs, so to speak, that's when you can finally start to enjoy it.
Guess I'll have to give it another shot. I think as of right now, I've just kind of abandoned hope on it, and I'm like, all right, how long until Far Cry 6 comes out?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still waiting on getting a PlayStation 5, which should be arriving next week. Fingers crossed.
Oh, you actually got one?
Yeah, I had to pay a little extra,
Mm.
but the main caveat was that being that they're so hard to get a hold of now, I heard that they won't even be readily available to the public till like summer or fall. So I figured, you know what, I'm just going to shell out the extra couple bucks and get one, because my PlayStation 4 right now is acting super senile. It's just been ejecting discs by itself out of nowhere. Whenever I power it on, it sounds like the Millennium Falcon taking off. So
Yeah,
I think it's time to get it's time for an upgrade.
Yeah, I bought a PlayStation 4 for the first time like 2 Black Fridays ago, and bought like Spider-Man, Last of Us, like basically bought all the games that were only PlayStation exclusives.
Yeah.
So finally finished the Uncharted's, which I had played most of those, but I think I had the 2 women one, the newest one.
Yeah.
So I got close to finishing that one. Beat Last of Us 2, finished Spider-Man. Now I'm currently playing Miles Morales, which I was going to hold out until I got a PlayStation 5, but whatever. And but I was able to get the new Xbox like day one, so that was
really
like I was lucky enough to get a pre-order.
Nice.
Which was a clusterfuck.
I could imagine.
And then after I got it, 2 days before they were supposed to ship, they kept sending me an email saying that my payment didn't go through. So I checked my payment and I'm like, money's there. Like, what the fuck? What do you mean it's not? Payment can't go through. And then I had to like do this whole runaround with customer service, online, phone calls, emails, like, and then it all got squared away.
See, that was a big issue with me. As you know, I would have tried to get my hands on one day one, but I knew that I'd have to jump through a bunch of hoops like you did. And
I didn't know I'd have to though. Like the two, because I bought the Xbox One and then the Xbox One X when those both came out day one, and I'd never had any problems getting either one of those. So I assumed trifecta, like this would be the same thing.
Right.
And I knew everyone was having problems with the PlayStation 5. So my thing was just get your Xbox. That doesn't seem to be the as in-demand system. So just be fine with that and you're good. And then get the PlayStation 5 when it becomes more available. But I was like sweating bullets. I'm like, what the fuck you mean? I put in my pre-order. I got my email. It says it's confirmed. And here's my confirmation code. Like, how the fuck can you tell me like I'm not getting it? Like 2 days before it's coming out and it's supposed to be at my house.
Right.
Like, that's horseshit.
First world problems, man.
I know. First world problems. And then I recently got a Switch and I'm kind of like, why did I get this thing? But yeah, for traveling on flights, I love it.
Yeah, I've been meaning to get my hands on one for that purpose, specifically touring or plane flights in general. But I really don't have to worry about that right now because obviously we're not going anywhere. So I can bide my time.
Have you, with Brandon and Porter starting up Twitch accounts, is that something you've thought about doing?
I have thought about it. Brandon definitely is trying to get me on the Twitch train. But I need to get like the technical know-how of how to like set it all up. And like I've seen, like people's Twitch feeds, and there's just so much shit going on. It's very overwhelming. So that's something I'd have to learn. And the internet connection in my place isn't the most reliable. So that's an issue. And,
throwing you under the bus then for the connection issues.
Right. Yeah. It's all my fault.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, maybe at some point I'll get a wild hair up my ass and jump on the Twitch wagon.
Kind of, lastly, I guess, you switched from ESP guitars, and I gotta say, you and Dan not being ESP artists is kind of weird to me.
Yeah, we've a lot of people have said that, which I find kind of weird. Like, I didn't realize people put so much stock into which guitars we were playing. But yeah, I mean, I signed on with Balaguer guitars last year, and they've been treating me like a king. They've been super, super generous with me. I have a signature model, or actually a couple signature models out now, which if you go to balaguerguitars.com, shameless plug, you can go check those out. Yeah, I mean, it was for both me and Dan. It was just time to try something new. We have a new album coming out. It's a new decade. It's a new lineup.
Is that really what goes into buying a guitar? That's a new decade. Need new
right?
guitars.
Yeah. I mean, us as guitar players will find any reason to get a new guitar.
Oh, I bought 3 in the last year, and I don't even need them.
Well, I mean, guitar players really only need one guitar, but
yep.
Try to convince any guitar player of that. Yeah. You're not going to get very far.
I'll at least say this time, with one of them, I got new pickups, different set of pickups that I'm used to putting in, and that's been really interesting and kind of eye-opening for me, because I went with Fishman's after talking with Ken for a while, and I wasn't insanely sure if the hype was real, but then I'm like, all right, a lot of my favorite guitar players, like Steph from the Deftones, I really like his tone and the versatility of his tone. And when you see him live, he's able to read. And I know a lot of that is also Kemper's too. So before any guitar nerds like, oh, well, actually, it's he's got his tone in his Kemper too. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But the versatility of him, of what he's able to do live with his guitars and so forth, and but Andy from Every Time I Die, kind of starting to use them a little bit, and just seeing the versatility of who's using them and kind of being like, well, I mean, I know I love EMGs, they always fucking sound great and they're reliable. So if all these people who used to be EMG only artists are doing this, let me see what the big deal is. So I put a set of the Killswitch Fluences in, and Jesus Christ, those things are phenomenal. And it's made me kind of and I just bought a new head right behind me too, for the first time in ever. So now I'm also having to dial in tones, which I've never had to do, which I'm like, this is so stupid. And then someone was just and I was thinking about everyone being like, you should just get a Kemper. And I'm like, I don't really have $4,000 laying around to get a Kemper. But then I'm thinking, as I'm trying to dial in tones, I'm like, God, a Kemper for $4,000? Is it really worth it for not fucking with all these dials and dialing in shit myself, and I can just download the tones I want? Maybe that is the way I need to go next time.
Well, the thing with the Kemper is that, I mean, there definitely is a learning curve.
Is there? Because everyone makes it seem like it's ridiculously easy.
Well, okay, but then again, this is coming from a guy who's very gear challenged.
Same.
And very gear stupid. So it took me a little while to kind of figure out how the whole thing works, and I still haven't, really figured out how to use it to its full potential. But yeah, I mean, the convenience factor of it, especially for touring bands, is it's hard to beat that, because we don't even travel with cabinets anymore because we're all on in-ears. So it makes our life for our crew a lot easier because they're not lugging around these gigantic heavy cabs, and it's consistent. I mean, there's always going to be the purists out there who will swear up and down that it's, analog amps are better. And yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to have a bunch of different amps to use at my disposal while on tour, but it can't happen. Right. So, I mean, this is pretty much the next best thing. And, I mean, chances are whoever's in the crowd is, they're not going to be listening to my tone or Dan's tone. And I'm pretty sure they're not going to be like, oh, that's definitely digital. That's definitely a Kemper, or they're using a Axe Effects or whatever. Like, it's just, it's loud, it's distorted. You're good to go.
To be that asshole, I think at the Lost Rages show, which granted it's outdoors, so with the smallest grain of salt, the sound could have been moved by wind or whatever. As where I was in front of you, usually it's about where I am. But I was going to say, I did notice there was a couple times I was like, is that the right? I think it was like Doomsday. I was like, is that the right tone for that? Like, that doesn't quite sound like because that's usually
I might have very well fucked up and had it on the wrong preset.
And I've seen that a couple of times, but it was just like one of those, like, where I am that asshole who's like, oh, I've listened to these things so often, and I know, like my wife always jokes, she's like, I don't think I've ever, like, at the time, she's like, I don't think I ever listened to the new Atreyu record, but I know every song off of it because I heard it live like a shitload of times.
Right.
I know this set, and I was like, well, that's how it happens. Actually, my last question for you before I let you go. So, my wife and I have really fallen in love with the Paper Castle song. And I've kind of talked to Porter about it. Like, when he was on his stream the other day, I was talking to him about it. I was like, oh, what are your, because he was doing like a Music Wednesday thing or something. And I was like, oh, like, what are some stories you have of that? And he was like, oh, I don't know. Brandon came with the chorus, and, he was kind of talking about some things. And he's like, I don't know. Just didn't really have a whole lot. I think he said actually, like, Jacoby was tapped initially to do kind of like Alex's, like, kind of rapping-y part initially, but that didn't pan out. Of course, the internet goes out right there. Who plays the guitar melody that kind of accompanies the ascending vocal and like the synth thing that's going on in the background? Is that you? Because that feels like a you part.
Honestly, I don't remember. That's the weird thing about recording an album, is that you're so invested into it at the time. And then once it's done, it just, you don't ever think about it again. So when it comes to, like, if we're going to play new songs on tour, it's kind of like, it's a huge undertaking for me and Dan, because we have to figure out who did what. And then on top of that, how to play it. Because it might have very well, like, certain parts of songs just end up on there, like, right at that moment in time. It's just totally spontaneous. You lay it down, and then you don't think about it ever again until you have to play it again. And then you have to go back through and be like, okay, is that me or is that you, Dan? I don't know. Well, do you want to play it? I don't know how to play it. you play it. So we have a lot of homework to do whenever we release a new album, and eventually head out on tour. We've got to kind of dust off some cobwebs and take a little refresher course.
What is a song that you've always wanted to play live but you haven't, out of the catalog?
Oh man, actually, we were just talking about this the other day. There's a song off our second album called Nevada's Grace.
Hell yeah.
Which I don't think I know I've never played it. And actually, I listened to that song for the first time in a long time, somewhat recently. And I was actually kind of taken aback as to how good that song is, especially when thinking of how young we were when we wrote it. Like, it's a heavy song for sure, but it's also, it has like this sense of maturity to it, where it's not just, brutal breakdowns and sick mosh parts. there's a lot more to it than that. There's an ebb and flow to it. There's peaks and valleys. The song itself, I mean, it sounds so fucking cheesy to say it, but the song itself is very much like a journey.
Yeah.
So hopefully one day we can bring that and put it into the set, and hopefully people will love it. Some might not, because like we've always had that not problem, but like somebody will request some deep cut, and we'll be like, okay, yeah, we'll give that a try. Let's play it. And, we play it, and then it's just blank stares from the audience, because either, it's such a deep cut that they're not familiar with it, or that's not the song that they came to see. So it's always a weird thing. Like you kind of have to pick and choose your battles as far as which songs to play.
I think that was the thing for me, why it was so fun to see you guys again. I don't even live in this state, but it's in this area, but it's easier to go to than going to Detroit. But when you guys played that, God, where the fuck was that? That festival in Toledo. It was like You Guys See His Legend. It was like a bunch of tours that just happened to merge.
Okay. Yeah, I vaguely remember.
Yeah, it was weird. But you guys played your greatest hits set, the fan picked one. And it was really cool to see some of the songs that like I haven't seen it since some of those albums had come out and so forth. And it was just like, oh shit, like it's really cool to hear these songs. And it just kind of gets to the point where it's like, I know you guys get to the point where probably there's stuff you guys want to play, but like you're like, well, gotta do Lip Gloss, gotta do this, gotta do this, gotta do this. Like, and then it's like, well, that's our 45 minutes to an hour.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we were to leave Right Side of the Bed out of the set for a while, I'd be perfectly fine with that. In fact, I would actually encourage it. But, like you said, fans, they're paying good money to see you play that song specifically, So
I think. Oh.
No, go ahead.
As I say, I think in light of your live stream that you guys did and Brandon playing The Theft by himself, I almost would like to see you guys do an unplugged of some sort.
We've briefly toyed with that idea. Not necessarily playing like a full-on acoustic set, but kind of changing things up a little bit with certain songs, like we did on The Theft, just to kind of give it new life, and it's fun for us to do stuff like that, because it keeps a song that could be 13, 14 years old, changing it a little bit here and there kind of adds new life to it for us, and as well as the audience too.
Yeah. Last question before I have you plug socials and all that kind of stuff. What are you looking forward to in this new year?
Well, first and foremost, hopefully, like getting to play shows again. I mean, I think that's really the only thing that I'm looking forward to, just because like, when this whole thing started, it was like, okay, everybody's got a shelter in place. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anybody. And I was like,
fine, I'm doing that.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? That's your typical Wednesday for me. Like, right. No problem. I can do that. And then, after a few weeks of that, it turned into a few months of that. And I'm like, okay, this is getting really fucking old. So, yeah, I mean, getting to play an actual show in front of people will be, I will definitely have a huge sigh of relief once that happens, or even just going to a show to see somebody play live. Like I'm more than down for that too.
Surprised I didn't see you guys on that Florida festival that got announced last week.
Yeah, there's been some pop. It's hard to keep track now because there's so many that either reschedule and then they get canceled, or they they just flat out okay, well, it's not happening this year. It's going to happen next year. Maybe not even next year. Maybe the year after that. Who knows? So I kind of gave up on really paying attention to what is happening, what isn't happening, because it can change, literally change an hour from now.
Right.
So yeah, we just gotta wait and see, unfortunately.
Where can everyone find you, or whatever you would like to plug?
God damn, the sun is like right in my face.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, thank God I'm not talking to Porter. I would have lost you.
You would have just gone up in flames.
You just would have been a beard.
Okay, so socials. I'm on Instagram at Travis Miguel, no spaces. Same with Twitter.
Are you on
Facebook?
Twitter?
I am. I'm not as active on Twitter. But even, that being said, like I post maybe once a week on Instagram.
Yeah.
So
that's why I was surprised with Twitter.
Yeah. But I am on there. Facebook, I don't really mess around with all that much anymore because evidently that's for old people. And
hey, you got to get a space. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I see it's hard to keep track with.
Have you seen this? The space.
What is
it? Space Hey, I think is actually what it's called. Someone recreated MySpace.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's like a top 8.
I created my profile about a month ago. I haven't really had a chance to fuck with it, but like it, by all accounts, when I was setting everything up, like your music, it's got the box for all your stuff to fill in and all that kind of stuff, and it has like the online now like thing, just like MySpace did. I'm kind of like, I don't want to get too involved and waste my time creating this thing,
right?
But it's got like the blogs, it's got all that kind of stuff, and it's one of those where I'm like, people say this is what they want. Like, is it going to be a thing? But then again, I also just got an email that was like, Vero 2.0 is here. And I was like, oh, fuck, you guys are back? Like, you were cool for like 2 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody's attention span is literally like the size of a gnat, mine included. So, I mean, I'm sure next week there'll be something else. But yeah, the whole MySpace thing, that's funny because we were just talking about, nostalgia. Yeah. And evidently the nostalgia is real.
Better platform for bands, though, honestly.
What's that?
I said I feel like it was a better platform for bands as far as being able to pick up, have people share it, have people be with the bands that they loved and so forth.
Yeah. I'm getting weird audio.
Oh. Well, maybe that just means we need to stop.
We made it through the end, though.
We did.
I'm proud of us.
And yes, and I will forever blame you for all the connection issues, even though I had to switch my computer and everything else into something else. I'm still going to blame you or the weather.
Fair enough.
Well, thank you again so much for taking the time, and hopefully we will see you at some point at the next show, if I actually see you.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This is cool.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Likewise, brother.
Peace.
Peace.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.